Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Iraq says 6 people, including 3 soldiers, have been killed in US airstrikes near Baghdad. The Iraqi military said 12 others were wounded in what it called a targeted aggression against the country's armed forces. The military said the attacks violated Iraqi sovereignty. Meanwhile, Iran has warned US President Donald Trump against taking dangerous actions after the airstrikes in Iraq. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Abbas Mousavi said Trump should reconsider the presence of troops in the area. Earlier, the Pentagon said it targeted 5 weapons facilities belonging to the Kataib Hezbollah militia in operations across Iraq. It said the strikes were defensive, proportional, and a direct response to the threat posed by Kataib Hezbollah. Yesterday, 2 Americans in Britain were killed in a rocket attack at the Taji Air Base in Iraq. The Taliban have called on the foreign nations not to make comments about the future administrative structure of Afghanistan. In a statement, the Taliban said the remarks by the international community on Kabul's internal matters violate the Doha Agreement. It said the Afghans will chart a course for their future in a free atmosphere. The statement comes after head of the US military's Central Command, General Kenneth McKenzie, said the Taliban's current actions are unhelpful for intra-Afghan talks. Indian troops have killed another youth in the occupied Kashmir's Baramulla district. The youth was killed during a search operation in the district. 35 people have been killed in the occupied valley in the last 2 months. The valley has been under a curfew and the communications blackout since India stripped the region of its autonomy last August. The United Nations and the international community have urged India to restore normalcy in the region, but New Delhi has kept the restrictions in place. China has reported single-digit new deaths and confirmed cases for the first time since the novel coronavirus outbreak began. The National Health Commission says 7 people lost their lives and 8 more infected in the last 24 hours. As the epidemic appears to slow down, local governments have been ordered to revive their economies. Tech giant Apple has reopened all the 42 of its branded stores in China. The country's industry minister, Xin Gobin, said outside Hubei province, 95% of the large firms and business have returned to work. The number of the people to have died from COVID-19 in the country currently stands at 3,176, with 80,813 confirmed cases. The World Health Organization says the global community should work together to fight the new coronavirus rather than blaming each other. This comes as the COVID-19 outbreak continues to spread worldwide, claiming thousands of lives.
After the WHO officially declared the outbreak as a pandemic, spokesperson Tarek Jasarevic said every country should take early containment measures. He said basic public health actions including epidemic surveillance have proven effective in stopping the transmission chain. The spokesperson said the responsibility to contain the pandemic falls on everyone, not only on health workers.
We have seen what countries like China, South Korea, or Singapore have done, and they have done very strong basic public health actions in terms of epidemiological surveillance, and that's basically finding people who are infected, testing them, treating them, looking for their close contacts, and trying really in that way to slow down or to interrupt the transmission chain.
Meanwhile, South Korea, once the largest coronavirus outbreak outside China, saw its newly recovered patients exceed fresh infections for the first time. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed 110 new cases, but 177 fully recovered patients were released the same day, while India has reported its first death from the novel coronavirus.
China says the US Army may have brought the new coronavirus disease to Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus, while Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei also implied the outbreak can be part of a biological attack by the US.
In a tweet, Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Li Jianzhao said Washington owes Beijing an explanation. The statement comes after US President Donald Trump, in his address, called COVID-19 a foreign virus that started in China. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also referred to the coronavirus as the Wuhan virus. Meanwhile, Khamenei in a statement called on Iran's armed forces to help the government fight against the disease. He said the measure could also be a form of biological defense drill.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for an immediate formation of a unity government to tackle the coronavirus pandemic. In an address, Netanyahu said he is asking for an emergency national government for a limited time. He said it was necessary to form a government to save the lives of citizens. Netanyahu's opponent, Benny Gantz, said he was willing to discuss the proposal. He says such a government should include representatives from all the parties in the parliament. The ruling Likud party and rivals Blue and White party failed to secure a majority in March 2nd elections. Russia says Israeli attacks on Syrian territory have increased tensions in the region. Speaking to media, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said Moscow is concerned over Israel's continued airstrikes. Zakharova said the Israeli practice of delivering unilateral airstrikes violated the sovereignty of neighboring Arab nations. She said that such arbitrary actions undermine regional stability. In a relevant context, Zakharova said consultations are being held between Russian and the Turkish defense ministries to guarantee implementation of a ceasefire deal. Syria has been struggling with a civil war between President Bashar al-Assad's government and rebels since 2011. The EU says it will pay €2,000 each to migrants in camps on Greek islands who are willing to return to their home countries. EU Home Affairs Commissioner Elvia Johansson announced the scheme in Athens. Johansson said the temporary offer is open for 1 month. Johansson said the scheme is open to people who arrived at the border before January the 1st. At the border itself, Greek forces have used tear gas and water cannon to deter migrants from trying to cross into Europe. Greece says it has stopped 45,000 people from entering the country in the past 2 weeks. Tens of thousands of refugees have been trying to get into Greece since Turkey opened its side of the border. The war in Syria has almost entered its 10th year. Damascus residents say they are lucky there's less violence around their city today, but the trauma from the past battles lingers on. More in this report.
Conflict grew out of popular protests against the regime of Bashar al-Assad in 2011. It then morphed into a violent insurgency and civil war after the government responded with crushing force. Since then, over 511,000 people have been killed. Some measure of calm has been restored in the capital Damascus after years of fighting. However, residents say they're still struggling to rebuild their lives.
How can I forget the war? Even after 10 years, I can't forget it. The war took the people dearest to my heart. It took my only son, Mazin, and it took my left arm from my body and left me with a permanent fracture in my leg. It took my house and my car.
There are others who have suffered even more gruesome injuries. One displaced resident living in a refugee camp near the border with Turkey has lost both his eyes and legs. Ibrahim Al-Ali's body is like a map of his miraculous but horrific journey through the bombing campaigns of northwestern Syria.
I was on my way back from work and was wounded by a landmine. That was the last day I saw the world. The landmine led, as you see, to my right leg being cut at the knee and my left leg also at the knee. And I lost my right eye completely and my left eye completely.
Most Syrians simply wish for a home they can call their own, where they won't have to worry about evictions or bombs from the sky.
I hope to have a home that no one can make me leave. Whether awake or asleep, I'm dreaming about this because I'm tired of being displaced.
There are around 5.6 million Syrian refugees around the world, with an additional 6.2 million displaced inside the country. Much of the fighting is now restricted to the country's northwest, in and around Idlib province.
The African Union has called on Libya's warring sides to immediately open talks on a political solution to the civil war. The call was made after 3 African heads of state, the African Union chief and a senior UN envoy met in the Republic of Congo. It is their second meeting since the Berlin summit in January. In the German capital, leaders agreed to end foreign interference and impose an arms embargo on Libya. Tripoli's government of national accord has been battling Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar since the fall of dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. International efforts to end the conflict have stumbled, and Libya's African neighbors have been seeking a wider role in solving the country's crisis.
De contact The contact group reiterates its strong condemnation of the violations, interference with the arms presence, dispatch and use of external fighters on Libyan territory.
La présence, l'envoi.
The US says it has imposed sanctions on a subsidiary of Russian oil giant Rosneft to pressure the Venezuelan government. The action is part of increasing competition between the US and Russia over the South American country. The Treasury Department says it has sanctioned the TNK Trading International, which brokers the sale and the transport of the Venezuelan crude oil. It blacklisted Rosneft Trading SA, also a Rosneft subsidiary, and its president Didier Casimiro last month. The Treasury has also issued a general license allowing companies to wind down their transactions with RTSA and TTI before May the 20th. Switzerland-based trading company TTI and RTSA handled a large percentage of Venezuelan oil exports last year. In the US, former military intelligence analyst and WikiLeaks source Chelsea Manning has been released from prison. She was remanded for refusing to testify in a US investigation of WikiLeaks and had been held in a Virginia detention center since last May. Manning was due to appear in the court on Friday, but a federal judge ruled that her testimony was no longer needed. The judge then ordered that she be released immediately. In 2013, Manning was found guilty of espionage of leaking secret military files to WikiLeaks. The former intelligence analyst accrued over $250,000 in fines for refusing to cooperate with the inquiry into WikiLeaks. The release order comes after her legal team said she had tried to commit suicide and was recovering in the hospital. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says her country still has much more to do to end white supremacism and racism. Ardern's remarks come ahead of the first anniversary of the Christchurch mosque attacks that killed 51 people last year. Ardern said New Zealand has fundamentally changed after the massacre at 2 mosques. In a news conference, she said the country needs to continue challenging the growing threat from the far-right groups.
A year on, I believe New Zealand and its people have fundamentally changed. I can't see how you could have an event like this and not. But the challenge for us will be ensuring that in our everyday actions, in every opportunity where we see bullying, harassment, racism, discrimination, calling it out as a nation.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Greece is about to swear in the country's very first woman president as it grapples with a surge of coronavirus cases. Ekaterini Sakellaropoulou will become the new Greek head of the state for a 5-year term. Sakellaropoulou was elected president by parliament in January after receiving one of the broadest cross-party majorities in Greek history. Until now, the new president was head of Greece's top administrative court, the Council of the State. Although the president is normally the head of the state and commander-in-chief, the post is largely ceremonial. Greek presidents confirm governments and laws, and technically they have the power to declare war, but only in conjunction with the government. Paris votes in the first round of its mayoral elections on Sunday. The city mayor's office is the country's most high-profile local government job. This time, all 3 candidates are women, which will keep the job in female hands. Details in this report.
Months ago, the Paris mayor's office seemed to be within the grasp of President Emmanuel Macron's party. But LREM candidate Benjamin Gruwek's campaign collapsed after a sex scandal involving him emerged in the news. Since then, he's been replaced by Health Minister Agnes Buzyn as the party's candidate.
I'm campaigning focusing on the first round of the election, and my aim is to come first in every district. My goal now is to really talk to the women and men of Paris about my program, which is thorough, which addresses their needs, and to show them what my vision of Paris in the 21st century is.
Buzyn is campaigning on a centrist pitch but has struggled to close the gap with her rivals to the right and left. The current frontrunner is incumbent Mayor Anne Hidalgo from the Socialist Party.
I am active on ecological issues because I realized quickly, first of all as a teenager, but then when I was a councillor before I even became mayor, the impact we have on our environment and the danger we expose living creatures and our own children to.
Then there's Conservative candidate Rashida Dati, who was a justice minister under former President Nicolas Sarkozy. Her ratings have climbed unexpectedly in recent days, with some polls indicating she could win Sunday's polls.
We are still here, more of us than ever, more determined than ever, propelled by a tide which is rising higher every day. They weren't expecting us, they didn't see our forces grow.
All three candidates' campaigns are focused on climate issues, cleanliness, and crime. The elections come at a time when coronavirus fears are rising in Europe. As such, voter turnout could be low.
The U.S. Defense Department says it wants to re-evaluate its decision to award a cloud contract to Microsoft. Last October, Microsoft won a $10 billion contract to build a cloud network for the U.S. military. A rival data services provider, Amazon, filed a lawsuit in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, contesting the decision, arguing it was politically motivated. The retailer claimed President Donald Trump's personal dislike of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos influenced the decision. Last month, the U.S. judge issued an order at Amazon's request, temporarily blocking the U.S. military from starting work on the project. The judge said Amazon stood a substantial chance of succeeding in its protest on its merits. Government lawyers have asked the court to send the matter back to the Pentagon for reconsideration. Amsterdam's canal boat rides are one of the city's biggest tourist attractions. Unfortunately, they are powered by diesel, a major contributor to global climate change. The Dutch government has decided to take on the issue, replacing the boat's diesel engines with electric motors.
There are 12,000 recreational boats in Amsterdam that cater to 4 million passengers daily. Only 5% of them are emission-free. Most run on diesel, which contributes to air pollution, water pollution, and global climate change. Taking note of the problem, the authorities have planned to phase diesel engines out of the canals by 2025. They've already launched a floating charging station for electric boats.
Over here, you see the power cables, who connects the batteries with the engine. And most important, the communication cables, so we can read all the data from the batteries and also see if there are any problems with the batteries.
The authorities hope to have 100 charging stations installed by the end of 2021.
And what this battery does is capture the energy when it's there, capture it off-grid in this battery and move it to the places off-grid again where it's needed. So this is, instead of having all these new power plants and all these new power stations within a city where there's simply not enough room for.
Work is also underway to convert the mostly diesel-based fleet to electric power. 75% of the city's 550 commercial vessels qualify as emission-free. Officials are already working on the transition of the rest to electric power.
European markets are trading higher as regional stocks attempt to rally after the worst sell-off in history. The coronavirus pandemic continues to dominate investor sentiment with mounting fears of a global recession. London's FTSE 100 has gained nearly 8%, while the CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 7% higher. Frankfurt's DAX is also trading nearly 7% higher. Oil prices were also up more than 5%. The European Central Bank says the euro area GDP growth is projected to fall to less than 1% from its previous forecast for 2020 over the coronavirus pandemic. The bank's president, Christine Lagarde, says the projections suggest muted growth in the first half of the year, followed by improvement in the second. The ECB has kept its key interest rates unchanged while announcing new stimulus to back the Eurozone financial system against COVID-19. Refinancing and interest rates on marginal lending and deposits have been kept at 0%, 0.25% and negative 0.5%. In the meantime, EU manufacturing output slipped 1.5% in January from the same month last year. Eurostat says the calendar-adjusted industrial production index fell to 102 points in January 2020. Cryptocurrencies have lost $93.5 billion in the last 24 hours following the global stock sell-off. Industry site CoinDesk says major cryptocurrency Bitcoin dropped by 48%. In the past few years, Bitcoin has been seen as digital gold and become something of a safe haven asset in which to park money. But after losing most of its gains for the year, it has now been labeled as risky, an asset as equity. Other cryptocurrencies have followed suit, with Ethereum tanking 49%. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.